They learned how to both win and lose a game with grace and good sportsmanship. What happened to that ethos? Why did America become so whiny? Because we're letting people get away with worrying more about feelings than truth and Christian values/common sense. And we let leftist activists have their way because they make a lot of noise. We're getting farther and farther away from Norman Rockwell's America and from God as we move closer to Karl Marx's dark world. Come to think of it, isn't the Bible full of tales of what happened to Israel each time they fell away from God? Is the same thing happening to America? Where is God now, and what is He doing? Is He paying attention? Does He have a plan? Isn't He incensed by how He's being treated by mankind? God's fury was poured out on Israel repeatedly when they turned away from Him and started worshiping idols. So where is His wrath now? Oh, wait. Look what's happening to America. Is all of what we've presented herein happening to us because of our falling away from God, or is it just coincidence? Speaking of falling away, according to informed sources, church membership and people who identify as Christians are in decline. Is that the falling away prophesied about the end times? The secular left in America is obsessed with the desire to import flip-flop wearing, uneducated, unskilled, perpetually needy Latin Americans into the country because they think they will always vote for Democrats and keep them in perpetual power, thus turning the United States into a one-party nation permanently. In Europe, the left sometimes justifies this by saying they have a declining birth rate and need more young people as replacements to work and pay taxes to support the aging population. At least that's what the United Nations was blathering about when they hatched a plan in March of 2000 called replacement migration that was eventually pushed on European countries in 2015, which instigated a great migration of hundreds of thousands of North African and Middle Eastern Muslims walking right up the road into Europe shouting, insulting, robbing, assaulting, raping and plundering their way as far north as Sweden. Most of the migrants were young men who sexually assaulted more than 1,000 German women in 12 cities across the country at New Year's Eve celebrations, 2015 to 2016, and 24 of the women were actually raped. Interestingly, instead of becoming replacement workers, many of the immigrants that invaded Europe wound up living off of generous welfare programs, especially in Sweden, where at last count only about 0.3% actually became employed. And the Muslim immigrants have established no-go zones where only Muslims are allowed in various places in European cities in which even the police don't go. So, the best laid plans of mice and left-wing men often go astray, don't they? Wasn't Charles Martel, grandfather of Charlemagne, known for saving Christendom from the Muslim army of Adbi ar-Rahman in the 8th century at the Battle of Tours? And yet Muslim invaders poured into Europe unopposed 1,300 years later, pretty much doing whatever they wanted. How could that happen? Did Europeans have a higher opinion of their lands in the 8th century? But invitations by the Biden administration to Latin Americans to relocate to our country have caused chaos here, too. And it receives no corrective action from the Democrats because they initiated the problem as part of a plan to not only give citizenship to 20 million illegal aliens now living in the USA, but to import as many of them as possible. Unfortunately, the word is spreading all over the globe. The importation of poor Latins is not a humanitarian exercise. It is a political strategy to dilute America, commingle so many different cultures that there is no longer a distinct American cultural identity. And the end game is also to get these people to vote for Democrats, which is likely based on a strategy that goes all the way back to 1966, when two left-wing radical professors from Columbia University, where the communists made an nest in the 1930s, Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, recommended a way to precipitate a crisis, the hallmark of the left, that would lead to a replacement of the welfare system by overloading and imploding it, and replace it with socialism, thus leading to a system with guaranteed income, no labor required. Guaranteed income. Sound familiar? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez suggested the same concept a half-century later. She is a Democrat socialist and member of Congress, and it is common knowledge she is supported by Democrat Socialists of America. But to complete the point, in May 1966, Cloward and Piven published a paper in a liberal magazine, The Nation. The article was titled, "The Weight of the Poor: A Strategy to End Poverty." It can also be loosely connected to Democrat Lyndon Johnson's 1964 request to a Democrat Congress to declare an unconditional war on poverty. Since then, the American taxpayer has subsidized Johnson's war to the tune of $22 trillion, and yet we still have people living in poverty, had gainful employment, instead of guaranteed income, being glorified, and the money spent more wisely. America might not be so deep in debt, would be more prosperous, and we'd have a more effective and sensible government. Perhaps the trillions went to something other than to mitigate the ravages of poverty, just like the trillions they wanted to devote to COVID relief actually went to bail out states run into the ground by Democrats who have virtually bankrupted them and, among other pork barrel spending, $75 million of this money went to the National Endowment for the Arts. What does the National Endowment for the Arts have to do with COVID? In truth, only a small percentage of taxpayer money went to COVID relief, and the lion's share went to Democrat pet projects, which are always what they spend our money on. If there's anything Democrats love more than themselves, it is to tax and spend. Bankrupting the country and destroying the U.S. dollar is part and parcel to the Chinese wet dream, and there seems to be a connection between the two. Either that or China's economic war on us, and Biden and the Democrats' behavior are the biggest coincidences in history. In any case, the Democrat plan to defeat poverty has clearly failed for over half a century, and now they are coming up with a new plan to spend another $100 trillion on programs that are near and dear to their deluded liberal base and climate donors. That is likely to experience the same level of success as Johnson's plan to eradicate poverty. Let's mention, too, that Jesus said the poor will always be with you. And they have been despite Democrats spending, yet the Democrats continue to throw money to solve a problem that is unsolvable if Jesus knew what he was talking about. And he always did if the Democrats wanted to end poverty, or at least mitigate it, rather than throwing trillions of dollars at it, which is tantamount to Karl Marx's goal of redistributing the wealth. Perhaps a more effective strategy might be to fix the educational credentials of blacks who drop out of high school at a much higher rate than whites.